Today, we'll be talking about a budget lens for Sony full-frame cameras. Let's go. So welcome back to another video. My name is Mario. So it's great to see you back here again. If you are new here, make sure you hit the subscribe button for future content similar to today's video. And if you're already subscribed and you came back, thank you again so much for being here again. Today I wanted to talk about the Tamron 20mm F2.8, and it has a long name, so let me read it out. DI3 OSD M122. So this is a very budget-friendly ultra-wide angle lens for Sony full-frame cameras. If you have, like, for example, the Sony a7 III, a7 IV, a7C, 7R series, etc. So you can also use this lens on an APS-C crop sensor camera like the a6400 or a6600, but keep in mind that you get a crop factor of about 20 times 1.5, 30 mil. Math is not my strongest suit. This is a very budget-friendly lens, but it's not of cheap quality and of cheap optics either. It comes at about $299 US, and once in a while you'll be able to find it on sale for less than that, depending on when you're buying it. This lens came out a couple years ago now, but it's still a very good option for you if you're looking for a budget ultra-wide angle prime lens. A couple of characteristics that make this lens unique. First of all, how lightweight it is, and second of all, its 1 to 2 macro magnification capabilities. Let me talk about some of the specs and some of the build quality on this lens, but stay till the end of the video to hear my thoughts on whether you should be purchasing this lens. So let's first talk about build quality. This lens is super lightweight at 221 grams. It is weather sealed. It also has a filter thread size of 67mm, which is the same as all of the Tamron lenses for Sony full-frame cameras. This is important because you get the same filter thread size across the board if you own different Tamron lenses, so that you can use the same ND filters, circular polarizing filters, or any other filters that you may have. The construction of this lens is a little bit on the plasticky side, but at this price point, this is what we could expect. It does look quite nice, and although the focus throw is a little bit long, but overall the lens felt nice when I was using it. So one good thing about this lens is that it has a 1 to 2 macro reproduction, and you can also get very close to your subject with a minimum focusing distance of about 10.92 centimeters. In terms of autofocus, this lens performed okay. Autofocus was a little bit slow at times, but because it's an ultra wide angle lens, this isn't as critical because the depth of field is not going to be that narrow unless you're shooting macro. This lens does struggle with focus breathing, so it does take some time for it to focus between far and close objects. So that's something to keep in mind. In terms of sharpness, this lens is quite sharp in the center at f2.8 and at f5.6, but the corners are actually very soft. And even stop down to anything above 5.6, the corners were still a little bit too soft. So if you're using this lens as a sort of a landscape portrait or like a in situ portrait lens, then just make sure that you have your subject not too far off on the edge. So just have your subject as close to the center as possible. Bokeh isn't as nice on this lens as expected for a wide angle lens and for a lens at this price point. Not the best, but usable. In terms of flaring, these are some photographs of what the flares look like on this lens. So as you can see, it's not my favorite, but it's okay. There is a ton of distortion on this lens. These are some images before correction and after distortion correction for you to get an idea of the type of distortion that we get with this lens. But if you're in Lightroom or any other photo editing software, if you just apply the lens corrections and distortion correction effects, then you're able to get rid of that and you get a nice looking image. So I wouldn't be too concerned with that if you're planning to edit your photos. We have a little bit of a magenta and a cyan fringing on this lens, and it's not too pretty. It's quite heavy at times. So this is probably one of the cons of this lens. So there are a lot of pros and a lot of cons when it comes to this Tamron 20mm. In terms of the good things of this lens is that it's budget, pretty affordable, and that it's super lightweight. There are quite a few cons about this lens, quite a few things that are not that great, but when you think about the price, that sort of balances things out. Because if you wanted the best optical quality out there, you wouldn't be paying this amount of money for such a lens. This lens is quite sharp in the center, not so much in the corners. Bokeh is okay, autofocus is passable, but this lens does a terrible job in fringing, and there is a little bit of distortion, which you can correct for though. You do get a 1 to 2 macro magnification with this lens, which makes this lens quite unique. So if you currently do not have an ultra wide focal length and you do not have too much money to spend on a wide angle prime lens, then this might be one to consider. Or if you have the Tamron 28-75 and you want it a little bit wider, then you could try this 20mm. If you do have the 17-28 Tamron lens, then you can definitely skip this lens because the 17-28 includes the 20mm and it's also an f2.8 lens. So think about the lenses that you have, the different focal lengths that you have, and whether this would fit into your shooting needs and your budget. But if you wanted a better lens optically, then there is the Sony G20mm lens f1.8 that you could get, but that is 3 or 4 times more expensive than this Tamron lens. That Sony lens comes in at about $899, so you're paying 3-4 times the price of this Tamron lens. So anyways, that's it for today's video. If you learned something new, you enjoyed it, please hit that like button, subscribe if you haven't already, hit the notification bell for future videos from me. And that is all for today, and I'll see you next time.